Hello, everybody, and welcome to another of my weekly episodes of my Stories from Webb Chapter Chats, the book that I wrote with my family over at Webb Elementary in Navasota, Texas. This week's chapter is called The Light and the Dark, and it's a short chapter, but it's one that really means a lot to me. I've always thought of that metaphor of light and darkness and how light can drive out darkness. Darkness cannot exist when light is there, and how even when things seem at their bleakest, that tiniest spark or flame, darkness has to run from it. And I think that oftentimes in our lives, we have a lot of darkness, whether it's health issues, whether it's looming deadlines, our work is overwhelming us, friendships, anything like that, that sometimes that darkness really begins to feel overwhelming and we don't know what to do. But I think what's the hardest thing to do is in those moments to remember that we have to cling to the light, that we have to find people who will bring us up and remind us of who we are instead of losing ourselves in those who will drag us down. One of the stories in this chapter is from my math interventionist, Jane Brewer. Jane tells a story in this chapter about the time she was hit by a truck. And she says, have you ever said, I feel like I've been hit by a truck? Well, I actually was. And she tells a story about bicycling down the road one early morning and being on where she was supposed to be on the right side of the road, and a truck was passing, and the rearview mirror of the truck hit her. As the truck passed going 60 miles an hour, and how it created an inch-long scar on her arm, but that was the only kind of repercussions from the wreck. She said when she went to the doctor, they couldn't believe that everything else was fine with her. There were no back issues. There were no other limb issues, nothing. That she got hit by an F-150 going 60 miles an hour, and she walked away. And she said, and then in all of my life right then, I had been praying for God to give me some semblance of idea in this complex relationship I was in. She said, I thought I loved somebody, and he was on a pilgrimage in Spain. And when I told him I was hit by a truck, she said he barely even reacted. And in every conversation we had since then, he never asked about my arm. And she said, yet I teach a night class at a college, and every single time I would go to teach that night class, there was a student in there who would always ask about my arm. And she said that it wasn't even that me and that other student were friends. He was just a decent human being. And I love her line where she says, some people can see when they're in a bad relationship, others need to be hit by a truck. And she said, in the 3 days later that I realized I'd gotten my miracle, it was another day before I realized what it meant. God loves me. He loves me so much. He preserved my life in a situation where I could have died. He had a purpose for me I have not yet achieved. And I'm a little nervous about that. Once I've achieved it, will it bring on the trucks? She said, and so I sometimes caress that small, innocuous little scar and remember God's love. I remember to look for my purpose, and I remember that I matter. And I just thought it was such a powerful story of focusing on the positives in situations and how those can do that. And then I also share a story in this chapter about a family member of mine on holiday season. She said, I don't understand something about all you people in education. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I can't stand it when I see a teacher complaining about something on Facebook. She's like, they chose that career. They work with kids, for goodness sake. If I were to go and complain something about my job, I'd be written up or fired. She goes, but I see it from teachers all the time and it hits me. And that really hit me when she said that too, because I thought, I think I may have been guilty of that. And, all the time we can see teachers complaining about their lives on Facebook. The kids were crazy today. I feel disrespected at work. I hate all my paperwork. Why can't I just teach? And you know what? Those are real and valid complaints. They're not things that just don't exist. They're valid. But what about when our kids see those or hear those? Or they come down the hall hearing you complaining or hearing me complaining? Or what about the parents? Would the parents want their child in your class if all of your Facebook posts are about how terrible it is teaching now? And when I think about that, I realize that we can't forget that little eyes and little ears are always listening. And they hear us even when we were sure we were quiet enough that nobody could hear us. And so my hope for you when reading this chapter is that not only do you cling to the light in the darkest moments, but that you also find time to spread that light into other dark areas that other people may be experiencing. So this week, as you go upon your week, find ways that you can light up other people's days. And check out and get your own copy of Stories from Webb, available on Amazon now.